I heard the metal before I understood what it meant, a long scrape across concrete, slow, heavy, intentional. I was in the kitchen rinsing a glass when the sound came again, closer this time, followed by the dull shift of something wooden dragged out from a wall. The garage door was half open. Streetlight slipped through the narrow gap and cut a pale line across the floor. I stepped into the hallway and stood still. Another scrape. Then silence. My father did not work in the garage at night. He liked daylight, order, visibility. I walked toward the door and stopped at the threshold. He was kneeling beside the old cedar box, the one that used to sit on the highest shelf of his closet, the one he had told me, when I was 9, never to open, not because it was secret, but because it was sacred. He had pulled it down and placed it on the workbench under the hanging light. The bulb hummed softly above him. The lid was open. The metals were laid out in rows on a towel. He was polishing them with a cloth, careful, methodical, almost gentle. "You swore those were untouchable," I said. He didn't look up. "In Washington," he replied, his voice even, "honor doesn't pay the bills." The words were practical, not defensive, as if he were explaining interest rates or property taxes. I stepped fully into the garage. The concrete was cold beneath my bare feet. There was a second box on the floor, smaller, new. Inside it were sheets of bubble wrap, numbered tags, and a printed inventory list. I watched his hands. They were steady. He lifted one metal, inspected the ribbon, adjusted the pin. It looked brighter than I remembered. The metal too clean, the edges too sharp. He set it down and reached for another. It slipped. The metal hit the concrete with a muted click. Something white slid from beneath it and drifted toward my foot. I bent and picked it up. It was a receipt. Not old, not faded. The paper was crisp, the ink dark and recent. A lot number circled in blue pen. A buyer's premium listed below the final price. "These aren't yours," I said. He paused then, not with guilt, with calculation. "They're mine now," he answered. He reached for the receipt, but I didn't hand it to him immediately. I read the header first. Private military memorabilia auction. Out of state. Invitation only. My chest didn't tighten. My hands didn't shake. Something inside me simply went quiet. I placed the receipt on the workbench between us. The silence stretched. "You don't understand how things work," he said finally. "People expect a certain image." He gathered the metals back into the cedar box one by one, not hurried, not ashamed. I looked at them closely now. The shapes were wrong. The ribbon patterns did not align with his service era. One insignia had a campaign marking I knew he had never qualified for. I had grown up with these stories. I knew what he had earned. I also knew what he had not. "When did you buy them?" I asked. "That's not your concern." He closed the lid halfway, then stopped. "They'll be appreciated by someone who understands their value." The phrase was careful, prepared. He had rehearsed this, at least in his own mind. I watched the new box on the floor, the numbered tags, the inventory sheet. These weren't being stored. They were being listed. I remembered being 8 years old, sitting cross-legged on the living room carpet while he opened this same cedar box on Veterans Day. He would lift each metal and explain it. Not dramatically, just firmly. "These aren't decorations," he used to say. "They're proof." "Proof of what?" I had asked once. He looked at me then with a seriousness that felt like weight. "Of who you are when it counts." I had believed him. Standing in the garage now, I realized something. He had started believing something else. I turned and walked back inside. He didn't stop me. In my room, I locked the door. I placed the receipt on my desk and turned on my laptop. The auction house name was easy to find. Private site. Password-protected catalog. But the preview listings were visible. High-resolution images, lot numbers, provenance notes. I typed in the lot number from the receipt. The listing appeared. A distinguished service medal, described as original, documented, estate-sourced. accompanied by a summary of the original recipient's record, not my father's name, another man's, deceased 7 years ago, survived by spouse and 2 children, decorated for actions in a conflict my father had never seen. I sat back in my chair. The quiet in the room felt deliberate. I opened a second tab and searched the official military awards registry. Public access is limited, but enough information exists if you know how to cross-reference. I knew how. 3 medals in the box did not match my father's documented service record. One of them was registered, officially cataloged, its serial number traceable. I enlarged the image from the auction site and compared it to the registry file. The engraving matched. The ribbon wear pattern matched. The medal had not been reported lost. It had been sold. I checked the date on the receipt again. 2 months ago. I thought about the last banquet I attended with him, the way people shook his hand a little longer than usual, the way he corrected someone gently when they misidentified one of his honors. I thought about the committee invitation he had framed in the hallway. Something inside me settled into place. Not rage, not betrayal, alignment. Facts were facts. At 2 a.m, I had a list on my desk, lot numbers, registry entries, service discrepancies, public appearances. By 3, I had located an additional listing, another medal, same auction house, same buyer ID. By 4, the sky outside my window had begun to pale. Downstairs, I heard the garage door close. He moved through the house slowly. A cabinet opened, a glass set down. His footsteps paused outside my door, then continued. I did not move. At 4:30, I searched for the federal reporting line. There is a hotline dedicated to stolen or fraudulently claimed military decorations. It exists because this happens more often than people admit. I saved the number. I stared at it for a long time. Family loyalty is a quiet pressure. It doesn't shout. It leans. I thought about his voice in the garage. People expect a certain image. I thought about the widow whose husband's name was attached to that medal. At 5:12, I dialed. The line rang twice. A woman answered. Her voice was steady, unhurried. I gave my name. Then I gave the information, lot numbers, auction house, registry confirmation, no commentary, no accusations. She did not interrupt. When I finished, she asked for the listing URLs and the registered veteran's name. I provided both. There was a pause on the other end. "Elena," she said carefully, "do you understand what this could mean?" "Yes," I said. I did. She explained the process in neutral terms: verification, contact with the auction house, cross-reference with Department of Defense records, potential fraud inquiry. She did not say the word charges. She did not need to. When I hung up, the sun was rising fully. The house looked ordinary in morning light. I went downstairs. The cedar box was back on the shelf in the hallway closet, closed. My father was asleep in his chair, the television flickering silently in front of him. He looked smaller in daylight, older. Not like a hero, not like a criminal, just a man who had assumed no one would verify the story. I stood there for a moment. Then I went to work. Investigations do not begin with sirens. They begin with paperwork. A call to the auction house requesting provenance documentation, a request for confirmation of seller identity, a cross-check of serial numbers against official archives, a quiet inquiry into public appearances tied to specific decorations. By noon, I received an email acknowledging my report. By evening, the auction listing had been temporarily removed, pending review. He didn't mention it at dinner. Neither did I. He spoke about a luncheon scheduled for next week, about a Veterans Advisory Board meeting, about how important it was to maintain standards in public life. I listened. I watched his hands. They were steady. I wondered how long he had been building this second version of himself, how many rooms he had walked into wearing medals that belonged to someone else, how many hands he had shaken, how many doors had opened because of metal pinned to fabric, and how quickly those doors would close. After dinner, he stood to clear his plate. "Elena," he said without turning around, Sometimes you have to adapt. I met his reflection in the window. Adapt to what? I asked. To reality. I held his gaze in the glass. Reality is not an opinion. It is a record. Upstairs, I reopened my laptop. An investigator from Washington had sent a follow-up request for documentation. I attached everything. I did not hesitate. By midnight, I knew something irreversible had begun, not because I had confronted him, but because the system had. And systems, unlike families, do not adjust the truth to preserve comfort. That night in the garage did not feel dramatic. It felt precise, a line drawn quietly. By morning, the first official inquiry would reach him, and when it did, there would be no argument loud enough to undo it. The first contact didn't come with drama. It came the way government things usually do, a number I didn't recognize, a calm voice, a request for clarity. I was in my car outside the grocery store when the call came. I let it ring twice, long enough to steady my breath, then answered. "Elena?" the voice asked. "Yes." "This is Special Agent Harris. You filed a report yesterday morning." Her tone was neutral, not friendly, not hostile, professional in the way that suggests she has already decided not to waste time. "I did," I said. "I'm going to verify a few details. You're not in immediate danger, correct?" "No." "Your father is the person in possession of the items?" "Yes." "And the items are currently in his home?" "Yes." A short pause, paper shifting, a keyboard tap. "I'm looking at the auction listing you sent. You said the receipt was found with the medals. It fell out when he dropped one. Did he see you take it?" "Yes." "Did he attempt to take it back?" "He reached for it. I didn't give it to him immediately." "And he said what exactly?" I repeated it word for word. The phrases mattered. They always do. They're mine now. In Washington, honor doesn't pay the bills. People expect a certain image. Agent Harris didn't react to the content. She wrote it down like it was a weather report. "Okay," she said. "Next, you ran the serial number against the registry." "Yes." "Tell me the match result." I read it to her from my notes. Name, date, branch, award citation year, public record of the recipient's death. Another pause. "Elena," she said, and her voice changed slightly, not softer, but more exact, as if she was narrowing a lens. "Do you realize what you may have exposed?" "Yes," I said again. She exhaled once, controlled. "We're not only dealing with stolen property," she said. "There's a high likelihood of fraudulent representation. If he used the medals to gain access or privileges, that changes the scope." "I understand." "You're very steady," she observed. "I'm giving you facts." "That's helpful," she said. "Keep doing that." She asked for my email again, even though she already had it. Then she asked for something that made my stomach go still in a different way. "Do you have any proof he publicly wore these medals?" I thought of the framed photographs in the hallway, the banquet programs stacked in a drawer, the plaque on the living room wall. "Yes," I said. "I can get it." "Don't confront him," she said immediately. "Don't ask questions. Don't remove anything from the home if it puts you at risk. We'll handle the chain of custody." I won't confront him. "I'm going to send you a secure link," she continued. "Upload whatever you have. Photos, programs, committee invitations, anything that shows he used these honors. Stick to originals if you can. If you photograph items, include dates if possible." "Understood." A final pause. Then her voice lowered slightly. "I'm based in D.C., she said. "This will likely be referred to the local field office where you are, but I'm staying on it until it's properly routed." "Why?" Another keyboard tap. She didn't answer directly. "Because the registered medal belongs to a deceased recipient," she said, "and because you're not the first person to find a counterfeit story in their own house. You're just one of the few who reports it." She ended the call with an instruction, not comfort. "Do not tip him off," she said. "We move better when people don't perform." When the line went dead, I sat in the car and looked at my hands on the steering wheel. They were steady, not because it didn't hurt, because pain is easier to carry than confusion. At home, my father was where he always was in the late afternoon, in the living room with the television on too loud, as if volume could substitute for company. He didn't look at me when I came in. "How was your day?" he asked. "Normal," I said. "Good." He said it like the word was a verdict. I went upstairs and opened the hallway closet. The cedar box was still there. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. Instead, I went to the cabinet where old paperwork lived, the place my mother used to keep envelopes labeled in her careful handwriting before she died, and the system turned into my father's loose piles. I found what I expected: programs from dinners, gala invitations, photos in cheap frames, him standing between men in suits, smiling the smile he used when he believed the room was his. Some of the photos were close enough to see the ribbons on his chest. One of them showed the medal I had matched to the registry. I didn't react. I took pictures. I made sure the date on the program was visible beside the photo. I made sure the plaque on the wall was visible in the background. Small details, context, the kind of thing that makes denial expensive later. Downstairs, a commercial ended and the anchor's voice shifted. My father laughed at something. Not loud, but pleased. A man amused by his own comfort. I kept working. When Agent Harris's secure link arrived, I uploaded everything. Photographs, programs, close-ups of ribbons, a screenshot of the committee roster online that listed my father's name with decorated veteran in the bio. I added no commentary, just facts. Then I waited. The waiting didn't feel like suspense. It felt like gravity. 2 days passed. My father didn't mention the garage again. He talked about the Veterans Committee meeting, like always. He made a joke about politics and how you have to know the right people. On the 3rd day, he came home earlier than usual. His keys hit the counter too hard. He didn't call my name, but I heard him moving through the house with a different rhythm, quicker, distracted. Cabinet doors opened and closed. A drawer slid out and slammed back. Then he stood in the hallway, looking up at the staircase. "Elena," he called. I came down slowly, not because I wanted to make a point, but because I refused to hurry for someone else's urgency. He held his phone out like evidence. "Did you call someone?" he asked. "What do you mean?" His eyes narrowed. He was trying to locate the version of me that would flinch. "I got an email," he said, "from an auction house, asking questions about provenance, about receipts, about—" He stopped, as if saying the rest might make it real. I waited. He didn't like waiting. It placed time in my hands instead of his. "Did you do that?" he asked again. I looked at his phone. The screen showed a polite message. Nothing accusatory, just procedural language and a request for confirmation. I felt the quiet inside me hold. "Yes," I said. For the first time since the garage, he looked genuinely surprised. Not angry yet. Surprised. "You had no right," he said. "I had every right," I replied. His mouth opened, then closed. He tried for control. "You don't understand what you've done," he said. I didn't answer, because he was wrong. I understood exactly. I understood that he had built a life on borrowed symbols, that he had used them like keys, that he had assumed I would protect the lie because it was wrapped in family. He took one step closer. "This is going to humiliate me," he said. And there it was, the real fear. Not consequences, not morality, exposure. I met his eyes. "You did it," I said, "not me." He stared as if I had spoken in a foreign language. "You think you're better than me," he said. "No," I replied. "I think the truth is heavier than your image." His jaw tightened. He looked away. In the silence, the house seemed to listen. Then he did something unexpected. He sat down. Not dramatically, not defeated, just suddenly tired. His shoulders dropped. "I was trying to keep things together," he said quietly, and the words sounded practiced, like he'd used them before to excuse other things. I didn't soften. "Those medals belong to someone else's family," I said. He swallowed. He didn't deny it. That was the moment I understood the investigation would not need my feelings. It would only need his silence. Because silence, in the presence of facts, becomes confession. That night, I heard him in the garage again, but there was no scraping this time, just the small sounds of packing, tape being pulled, a box folded, a lid set down carefully. He was trying to move the story out of reach. He didn't understand that stories like this don't live in boxes. They live in records. And records had already started to move, quietly, through systems that don't care who you are at dinner. I stayed in my room and made one more folder on my laptop. Dates, events, photographs, uploads, a timeline. By the time I closed the lid, I knew the next phase would happen without my involvement. That was the strange part. I had chosen a direction, and now the machine would do what machines do. No shouting, no speeches, just procedure. And my father, for the first time in my life, could not talk his way around it. The official letter did not arrive by mail. It arrived by email first. Subject line: Notice of Inquiry. Verification of military decorations. It was addressed to my father, copied to a regional field office. Not dramatic, not accusatory, precise. He read it at the kitchen table while I stood at the counter making coffee. His hand did not shake, but he read it twice. "They're requesting documentation," he said finally. "Yes," I replied. He lowered the phone slowly. "This is ridiculous." The word was automatic, defensive reflex. "They're asking for proof of lawful acquisition and authorization to wear," I said. "I have proof," he snapped. "Of purchase," I corrected, "not of entitlement." Silence followed. He stood, walked to the living room, then back again. Movement without direction. "They're overreaching," he said. "People collect things." "Collectors don't pin them on and attend advisory boards," I answered. That landed. He stopped pacing. The second email came 2 days later, shorter, more direct. The medals had been flagged as registered military decorations associated with a named deceased veteran. The sale had triggered a review under federal statute. The auction house requested return pending investigation. My father stared at the screen for a long time. "They can't prove anything," he said quietly. "They already did," I replied. The inquiry moved faster than I expected. A representative from the regional office requested an in-person meeting. Not at our home, at a federal building downtown. He didn't tell me when he scheduled it. I saw the printed confirmation on the counter beside his wallet. He wore a dark suit that morning, the one he saved for ceremonies. He adjusted his tie twice before leaving. "You don't need to come," he said at the door. "I'm not," I answered. He hesitated. For the first time since I was a child, he looked uncertain. Then he left. When he returned, he did not speak immediately. He set his keys down with care. His movements were smaller, measured. "They asked a lot of questions," he said finally. I waited. "They had photographs," he added. "I know." He looked at me sharply. "You sent them everything." "Yes." He pulled out a chair and sat. "They said wearing decorations not earned can constitute misrepresentation," he said. "They used legal terms. They always do. They mentioned committee appointments," he continued, "access privileges, speaking fees." He stopped there. The room held the rest. "What did you tell them?" I asked. He looked at the table. "That I purchased them legally." "And when they asked why you wore them?" Silence. He did not answer, because there is no language that makes that reasonable. The formal consequences were not explosive. They were structured. He was asked to relinquish the medals immediately to federal custody, pending determination of rightful ownership. He was removed from 2 veterans advisory committees, effective immediately pending review. An ethics inquiry was opened regarding public representation tied to documented honors. No handcuffs, no headlines, just letters. Official, measured letters. His name was quietly withdrawn from an upcoming keynote panel. An event coordinator called and expressed regret over scheduling complications. Within a week, invitations stopped arriving. The framed photographs in the hallway remained, but the email confirmations attached to future engagements disappeared. Respect built on paper dissolved through paper. He did not shout. He did not accuse me again. He moved through the house like someone who had misplaced something invisible. The widow of the registered veteran was contacted by the department. I learned that through Agent Harris. The medal will be returned to the family, she told me over the phone, through legal transfer. Did they know it was missing? I asked. No, she said. They assumed it had been lost during estate handling. There was a pause. She cried, Agent Harris added without commentary. I closed my eyes briefly, not from guilt, from weight. We met at a cafe 2 weeks later. My father chose the location. Small, neutral, public. He arrived before I did. He was sitting at a table near the window when I walked in. He looked older, not physically weaker, just diminished. He didn't stand when I approached. I didn't think it would go this far, he said. I sat across from him. It already had, I replied. He folded his hands together. They said I misrepresented myself. You did. He inhaled slowly. I never claimed I earned those specific medals. You wore them. He didn't argue. For the first time in my life, he didn't try to redirect blame. I was afraid, he said quietly. Of what? Of being ordinary. The word hung between us. I spent years building something, he continued. Reputation, standing. After your mother died, people stopped looking at me the same way. I thought if I reminded them... He trailed off. Reminded them of what? I asked. That I mattered. I watched him carefully. This was not an apology. It was an explanation. Those medals belong to someone who earned them, I said. He nodded. I know. Knowing doesn't undo it. I know, he repeated. The coffee between us went untouched. They removed me from the committees, he said. Officially. Yes, I didn't fight it. That was wise. He gave a faint, humorless smile. You sound like them. I sound like facts. He looked out the window for a long moment. I told them I would return everything, he said, through my attorney. Good. They asked if anyone else knew. He met my eyes then. I told them no. I held his gaze. That was your choice. Yes. Silence settled again. Not hostile, just clear. I don't expect forgiveness, he said finally. That's good. He nodded slowly. I suppose I thought you would protect me. I protected the truth. He absorbed that without flinching. The medals were transferred back to the rightful family within the month. Through legal documentation, through verified custody, no ceremony, no public acknowledgement, just correction. My father's name faded from local leadership listings. His absence was explained as personal matters. No scandal, no spectacle, just absence. We did not rebuild closeness. Trust does not reset because someone admits fear. But something changed. He stopped telling embellished stories. He stopped referencing decorations in conversation. He stopped correcting people when they assumed more than was true. He spoke less, listened more. One evening, weeks later, I found the cedar box in the hallway closet again. It was lighter. Inside were only the medals he had actually earned. Proper. Documented. Enough. I closed the lid gently. Honor is not metal. It is alignment between action and truth. He learned that publicly. I learned it privately. We do not speak about that night in the garage. We don't need to. The silence now is different. It is not hiding. It is boundary. And sometimes love is not protection. Sometimes it is precision. The house grew quieter after the letters stopped arriving. Not immediately. At first, there were still calls, polite ones, clarifications, follow-ups framed as routine. My father answered each with measured composure. His voice never rose. He thanked people for their concern. He said it was all being resolved. Then the calls slowed. Then they stopped. The hallway wall still held the framed photographs, but the future events were gone from the calendar. No more charity luncheons circled in ink, no more advisory dinners penciled in, weeks ahead. The mailbox filled with ordinary envelopes again. Utilities, insurance, nothing embossed. My father did not remove the photographs. He left them where they were. I watched him pass them each day without looking directly at the ribbons pinned to his jacket in the pictures. He had once adjusted those frames whenever dust gathered along the glass. Now he wiped the surrounding wood trim instead. He did not speak about the investigation. He did not mention the cafe conversation. But one afternoon I heard him on the phone with his attorney. "Yes," he said quietly. "Transfer confirmation received." A pause. "No, I won't contest anything." Another pause. "I understand." When he ended the call, he stood in the kitchen for a long time without moving. The late sun came through the window and divided the room into light and shadow. He stood in the shadow. I was at the table with paperwork spread in front of me. Bills, personal records, routine tasks that keep a life intact. He cleared his throat. "They confirmed the family received them," he said. "I know," I answered. He nodded once. "That's good." Yes. There was nothing more to add. The medals were no longer in the cedar box. Only the originals remained, the ones properly documented, the ones earned within the limits of his actual service. The box felt lighter when I lifted it to dust the shelf beneath it. Not empty, just honest. The official conclusion arrived 3 weeks later. No criminal charges, formal censure, removal from committees, a written record placed in departmental files, language that would follow him in professional circles but not ruin him publicly. Precise consequences. Measured. Enough. He read the final notice at the kitchen table, folded it carefully, and placed it back in the envelope. He did not look at me. "They're closing it," he said. "Yes." "I suppose that's something." "It is." He sat back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. "For a long time," he said slowly, "I believed that if people saw the medals, they wouldn't question the rest. I waited. I didn't think anyone would check. They did. Yes." Silence again. Then, more quietly, "You did." I did not correct him. We met less after that. Not because we argued, because proximity was no longer necessary. The house felt smaller once the illusion had been removed, as if the walls had shifted inward to match reality. I moved my things gradually, a box at a time, books first, then clothes, then the small objects that accumulate quietly in drawers over years. He watched me carry them to the car without comment. One evening, as I was sealing the last box, he stood in the doorway of my room. "You're leaving," he said. "Yes." "For good?" "For now." He nodded. He did not ask me to stay. I respected him for that. The widow wrote a letter. It arrived addressed to me, not him. The handwriting was careful, deliberate. She thanked me for ensuring her husband's medal had been returned. She said she had not known it was missing, but she recognized the serial number immediately when the department contacted her. She said her sons had held it that morning in silence. She did not mention my father. She did not ask questions. She ended with a single sentence. "Thank you for protecting what mattered." I folded the letter and placed it inside my own desk drawer, not as proof, as alignment. My father and I met once more before I moved out completely, at the same cafe. He looked different, not weaker, just stripped of something unnecessary. "They won't invite me back," he said plainly. "I know." "I suppose that's fair." "Yes." He stirred his coffee without drinking it. "I thought respect was something you secured," he said. "Displayed. It isn't. What is it then?" "Consistency." He absorbed that. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said again. "This isn't about forgiveness." "What is it about?" "Accuracy." He gave a faint smile. You always were precise. Yes. We finished our coffee in quiet. No reconciliation scene, no dramatic confession, just acknowledgement. I moved into a small apartment across town, nothing ornate, clean lines, plain walls, quiet neighbors. The first night there, I unpacked slowly. I placed my books on the shelf, arranged my documents in a filing cabinet, set the kettle on the stove. Control is not loud, it is small systems working correctly. Weeks passed. My father adjusted to his new position in the community, less visible, less consulted, still present but not elevated. People stopped referencing his decorations and introductions. They simply used his name. It did not destroy him, it redefined him. We speak occasionally, short calls, direct updates, no embellishment. He no longer tells stories that grow with each retelling. He no longer mentions things he cannot document. He sounds quieter, not broken, corrected. I think often about that night in the garage, about the scrape of wood across concrete, about the moment the receipt slid onto the floor. There was a choice in that sound, not his, mine. Honor is not metal pinned to fabric. It is not applause in a room arranged for admiration. It is what you do when no one is watching and no one would blame you for staying silent. Sometimes love means preserving an image. Sometimes it means dismantling it. I chose dismantling. Not because I wanted to hurt him, because the truth was already heavier than the lie. I did not raise my voice. I did not threaten. I called a number and gave facts. The rest followed.